Please, don't leave me alone tonight." The words echoed through the night air like a prayer whispered from the depths of grief. Victor froze, one hand still on the steering wheel of his faded yellow Crown Victoria, the engine humming softly beneath him. He'd just pulled up to the gates of an old Georgian-style mansion nestled in the shadows of Atlanta's affluent Buckhead district. The rain had quieted to a mist, but the pavement still glistened like oil under the street lamps. Victor leaned slightly toward the passenger side window. A woman stood just outside the gate, soaked to the bone, her silver hair plastered to her cheeks, her arms wrapped tightly around her waist like she was trying to hold herself together. She had the presence of someone who once commanded rooms with a glance, but now struggled to remain visible. The porch light flickered behind her, casting long shadows across the lawn. Victor had been driving taxis for nearly a decade since the construction company he worked for went belly up after the 2008 crash. In that time, he'd seen his share of strange and sad. But this was different. There was no suitcase, no destination, no story. Just her and that single plea. He rolled down the window slowly. "Ma'am, I'm your driver. You called for a ride?" "I know," she said, her voice hoarse but refined. "I changed my mind. I don't want to go anywhere. I just can't be alone." Victor hesitated. Rules were rules. The meter started only when wheels turned, but something in her tone felt heavier than protocol. He looked at her hand, trembling, fingers raw like they'd been rubbing against stone, and then at her eyes, red, not from drink, but from crying, not weeping, mourning. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softening. She nodded, then shook her head. "No," she confessed. "I buried my son this morning, and now this house feels like a coffin." Victor said nothing. He didn't know what to say. He wasn't a therapist. He was a man who'd buried his own younger brother after a police shooting no one was held accountable for. But he knew grief when he saw it. It lived in posture, in silence, in the way people avoided their own homes. She stepped back from the window. "I'll pay for the time. I just need someone in the house tonight. That's all." He sighed. This wasn't the kind of situation he signed up for, but his gut told him she wasn't dangerous, just devastated. "What's your name?" he asked. "Rose," she said. "Rose Clark." He nodded. "Victor." He turned off the meter and got out of the car. The foyer of the house was grand, with dark wood floors and high ceilings. A crystal chandelier hung like a frozen waterfall above them. But the air was cold, untouched by warmth or life. Rose led him into a sitting room that smelled faintly of lilies and wood polish. Portraits lined the wall-soil paintings of stern-faced ancestors and, tucked among them, a framed photo of a teenage boy with deep brown eyes and an earnest smile. "That's Elijah," she said, following his gaze. "My son. I adopted him when he was 5. Smartest, kindest boy I ever knew. The world wasn't ready for him." Victor felt a lump rise in his throat. He took a seat on the far end of the couch, leaving space, not just physically but respectfully. "I made tea," she offered. "Would you like some?" He nodded. Minutes later, they sat together, two strangers linked by silence and shared sorrows. The tea was warm, sweetened with honey, the kind his grandmother used to make. "My family stopped speaking to me when I adopted him," Rose said, her eyes distant. "Said I was making a statement, as if loving a child could be political." Victor looked at her. "And yet, it always is." She smiled sadly. "They said I was ruining the Clark legacy, but Elijah, he was my legacy." The rain picked up again, rattling against the windows like applause for a drama no one wanted to watch. Outside, the city kept moving. But inside that house, time curled around two people who didn't belong in the same world, but somehow did. "He wanted to be a pianist," she whispered. "Played every morning before school. The last song he learned was Amazing Grace. After he left, I haven't been able to touch the piano." Victor shifted. He wasn't good at feelings. Not anymore. The world had taught him to armor up, but her pain was unfiltered, and something about it disarmed him. Maybe because he saw pieces of his brother in that boy's smile. Maybe because, for once, he wasn't the only one carrying ghosts. "You don't have to talk," he said quietly. "I can just sit here." "How?" She looked at him like no one had in years, with gratitude that felt heavier than gold. And so they sat, as the grandfather clock ticked, The house creaked, and a quiet pact was made between two souls seeking shelter not from weather, but from memory. If you've ever found comfort in the presence of a stranger, or stood at a crossroads where kindness could change a life, drop a comment and let us know. And if Victor's decision moved you, give this story a like so more people can hear it, and don't forget to subscribe. Victor barely slept. The house was too quiet, too still, like it was waiting to breathe again. He'd spent the night in a high-backed armchair in the sitting room, jacket draped over himself, eyes half closed but never fully resting. The grandfather clock in the hallway marked every hour like a slow heartbeat, reminding him that time was passing, even here, in this place that felt frozen in grief. Morning arrived behind soft gray clouds. Atlanta's usual hum was muffled by the lingering mist. Victor stretched his back, joints protesting. He stood and peeked through the window. The city hadn't stopped. People were walking dogs, buses wheezed along the street, and the world moved on as it always did. He stepped quietly into the hallway. The house was bigger than it looked from outside, with polished wooden floors, white molding, and delicate light fixtures that looked like they belonged in a museum. But everything was dim, lifeless. Pictures of Rose and Elijah lined the walls. Some were candid Elijah at the piano, grinning with cake on his face, arms around what looked like a rescue dog. Others were formal, stiff, trying to capture legacy. He paused in front of one photo. Elijah was in a private school blazer, standing in front of a banner that read, Whitmore Academy. Victor had heard of it. Prestigious, expensive, not exactly welcoming for kids who didn't fit the mold. A floorboard creaked behind him. He turned to see Rose standing there, wrapped in a navy robe, her hair loose and damp from a shower. She looked smaller in the daylight, thinner, almost translucent. "I didn't mean to intrude," Victor said softly. "You didn't," she replied. Her voice was steadier than the night before, but still hollow. "You stayed. That's more than I expected. I figured you might need some company this morning, too." She nodded and motioned toward the kitchen. "I haven't made coffee since Elijah left. Could use a hand." The kitchen was beautiful granite countertops, high-end appliances, and copper pots hanging like ornaments. But the fridge was nearly empty. Victor opened cabinets, found eggs, some biscuits in a tin, and a few sweet potatoes starting to wrinkle. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "You cook?" she asked. "Used to," he said. "My mom raised 4 boys. We had to learn or starve." He cracked eggs into a pan while she filled the coffee maker. The smell of breakfast slowly replaced the silence. It didn't fix anything, but it filled the air with something warmer than grief. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table. She picked at her food, more out of habit than hunger. Victor, hungry from the long night, ate quietly. "Elijah loved your sweet potatoes," she said suddenly. "He used to mash them with brown sugar and cinnamon, said it tasted like Christmas." Victor smiled faintly. "Smart kid. The smartest," she said, her voice catching for just a moment before she took a deep breath. "He tested off the charts, but that didn't matter to people who only saw his skin." Victor knew that story too well. His younger brother Malik had been sharp as a tack, talked about engineering at MIT. None of it saved him. "Elijah was quiet," Rose continued. "Not shy, just thoughtful. He wrote poetry, played the piano every day. But once he started high school, things changed. He came home one day and said, 'Mom, I don't think they want me there. Not really.' And I didn't listen. I told him to work harder, to prove them wrong." Victor swallowed. He saw it all in her face, the regret, the helplessness, that unique agony of watching someone you love fall and realizing too late you could have caught them. "He ever talked to someone?" Victor asked. "A counselor?" "I tried," she said. "The school said they had resources, but nothing came of it. Then one day he stopped playing piano, just stopped, and I knew something was broken." They were both quiet for a moment. Victor took a sip of coffee that had gone cold. "You said you had a brother?" she asked gently. He nodded. "Malik. He was 17. Got stopped on his way home from work. Fit the description, they said. He didn't fight, he never would have. But he didn't make it home." Rose's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her mug. "I'm sorry. No mother should bury her child, no brother either." Victor stared at the table. "Sometimes I think about what I could have done. Maybe if I'd picked him up that night. Maybe if I'd told him to wear something else. Crazy, right? Blaming the color of a hoodie. It's not crazy, she said. It's the world we live in. He looked up. Why'd you adopt him? She didn't hesitate. Because I saw him in a foster home where he was already learning to lower his eyes, to speak only when spoken to. He was 5, Victor. No one should learn to disappear that young. He exhaled. You're not what I expected. I get that a lot, she said with a sad smile. Especially from people who stopped calling once I brought Elijah home. Victor stood and began clearing the table. Rose followed, placing plates in the sink. As they moved in rhythm, something about the extraordinary, domestic felt like a tiny rebellion against despair. Can I show you something? She asked. He nodded. She led him down the hallway to a closed door. When she opened it, he saw Elijah's room. It was neat, untouched. Posters of jazz legends on the walls, a bookshelf filled with poetry and history. A keyboard sat in the corner, unplugged. Victor stepped in. The air was thick with absence. He used to sit right there and play, she said. Every Sunday morning. Said it was how he talked to God. Victor sat on the edge of the bed. He didn't say anything, just looked around, absorbing the details. A cracked metronome on the desk, a half-filled notebook, an old hoodie draped on the chair. He wrote, Rose said, all the time. I haven't had the courage to read most of it. Victor stood and walked to the bookshelf. He gently picked up the notebook. The handwriting was neat, careful. He opened it. The first page read, Being black and brilliant is a quiet kind of war. You fight it in your mind before the world even sees you. Victor closed the book. You should keep these safe, he said. I plan to, she replied. As they stepped back into the hallway, Rose paused. Victor, thank you, for staying, for listening. He gave her a quiet nod. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is just stay, but sometimes it's the only thing that matters. The day stretched on with a quiet intimacy neither Victor nor Rose expected. After lunch, simple sandwiches and apples sliced just the way Elijah used to like them, they found themselves back in the sitting room. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained overcast, lending the house a subdued stillness. Victor sat near the fireplace, nursing a warm cup of tea. Rose had gone upstairs briefly, returning with a small cardboard box held close to her chest. These are some of Elijah's things, she said, setting it gently on the coffee table. Her fingers lingered on the lid before she opened it. Inside were pieces of a young life, a chess medal, a cracked Rubik's Cube, a pair of worn-out concert tickets, and a photo strip of Rose and Elijah, laughing in a photo booth, faces pressed close, eyes shining with a joy that now felt distant. She held up the photo. This was 3 summers ago. We went to the state fair. He beat me at every game. He was terrible at roller coasters, though. Screamed louder than any kid there. Her smile faded into a sigh. I miss his laugh. Victor leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You ever think about doing something with all this? Something public? She raised an eyebrow. Like what? I don't know. A foundation. A scholarship in his name. Something to tell his story, so it doesn't end in this house. Rose looked at the box. I've thought about it, but people didn't want to know him when he was alive. Why would they care now? Victor didn't respond immediately. He understood that bitterness, the sting of being unseen until you were gone. Because stories like his are exactly the ones that need to be told, he said. So others don't feel so alone. So maybe some other kid out there sees a way through. She nodded slowly, but her eyes drifted toward the window. You're not the first to suggest that, she said, but most of them, they didn't really know him. Victor was about to reply when the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the air like a blade. Rose stiffened. That's unusual, she said. Victor stood. You want me to get it? She hesitated, then nodded. Please. He walked to the front door, cautious, and opened it slowly. A tall man in a tailored gray suit stood on the porch, holding an umbrella. His features were sharp, confident, the kind of face that didn't wait for permission to speak. Is Rose here? He asked, his tone clipped. Who's asking? Victor replied. Vincent Clark, the man said, brushing past him and stepping into the foyer like he owned the place. Victor closed the door slowly, his jaw tight. Rose, Vincent called out, you've got company. She appeared at the top of the stairs, her face instantly shadowed with tension. Vincent, I wasn't expecting you. Clearly, he said, eyeing Victor. "Who's your friend?" "This is Victor," she said, descending slowly. "He's been helping me." Vincent gave a tight, condescending smile. Helping, that's one way to put it. Victor remained calm, watching the man closely. There was something in Vincent's eyes that put him on edge. Too much calculation, too little warmth. "What are you doing here, Vincent?" Rose asked. "I came to check on you," he said, though his tone held no kindness. "After the funeral, you vanished. You haven't answered calls. The family's concerned." "The family didn't come to the funeral," she snapped. "Neither did you." "I had obligations," he said smoothly. "And to be fair, Elijah was never really—" He stopped himself, but the damage was done. Rose's voice trembled with fury. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." Vincent held up his hands. "I'm just saying, this house, this situation, you need help. Real help. Legal help. You can't let strangers just waltz in here, especially ones with no record, no background." Victor stepped forward, jaw clenched. "I'm not here to take anything from her." "Aren't you?" Vincent asked, his voice cold. "Because it looks to me like you're taking advantage of a grieving woman." "Enough," Rose shouted. The room went still. Victor stayed when no one else did. "You don't get to come in here and judge him after all the silence." Vincent's eyes narrowed. "I'm contacting the family attorney. If you're not careful, Rose, you'll lose everything." "I already lost everything," she said quietly. "The rest doesn't matter." He scoffed. "You say that now. But you'll see, when people like him disappear with more than just your sympathy." Without another word, he turned and walked out, the door closing behind him with a heavy thud. Rose collapsed onto the couch, her shoulders shaking. Victor stood still, the adrenaline fading from his limbs. "Are you okay?" he asked. She didn't look up. "That was my brother. He's always been like that. Calculated, efficient, never wrong." Victor sat beside her. "He's wrong about me." "I know," she whispered. "But he's not wrong about the world." Victor looked at her. "We don't have to let him win. Not this time." They sat there in silence for a long moment. The house no longer felt quite so empty. That evening, as dusk wrapped its arms around the Clark estate, Victor sat quietly by the grand piano in the corner of the living room. His fingers hovered above the keys, unsure, hesitant. The air was heavy from the earlier confrontation with Vincent, but it was also charged with something new: resolve. Rose stood in the doorway, watching him. She had changed into a soft cardigan, her hair now neatly pulled back. In her hands, she clutched a worn manila folder. "Elijah wrote these for a scholarship essay," she said, stepping forward and setting it down beside him. "They turned him down, said he was too ideological." Victor opened the folder slowly. Inside were 3 essays. Each page carried Elijah's voice, clear, poignant, unflinching. He read a passage aloud. "Sometimes I feel like the world wants me to smile but not speak, like my talent's only welcome when it's silent." His throat tightened. "This kid saw too much." "He did," Rose whispered. "He saw the cracks no one wanted to admit were there." Victor placed the folder down and looked at the piano again. "You think he'd mind if I played something?" Rose sat across from him, her eyes misty but gentle. "I think he'd be honored." Victor wasn't a trained pianist, but he remembered enough from church as a boy. His fingers found the opening chords of Amazing Grace, stumbling at first, then finding rhythm. The notes filled the house like incense, softening the sharp edges, washing over old grief. Rose closed her eyes, letting the melody carry her. The song ended, leaving silence in its wake, but not the suffocating kind. This silence felt clean, reverent. "We should do something," Victor said after a long pause. "More than just sit in this house. Something for Elijah." Rose opened her eyes, watching him carefully. "What did you have in mind?" "A public concert," Victor said slowly. "At the community center downtown. A tribute, a night of music and stories. Not just about Elijah, but about all the kids like him. Kids who don't get seen until they're gone." Rose tilted her head. "You think people would come?" "If we tell the truth," Victor said, "they will." She nodded, the spark returning to her eyes. "Then let's do it." Over the next few days, the Clark estate transformed from a mausoleum into a war room of purpose. Victor made calls to the local community center, calling in favors from musicians he once worked with when he DJ'd part-time at block parties. Rose reached out to former students, friends of Elijah, even reluctant relatives who'd once looked away. Some declined, but others responded with cautious hope. Word spread. They decided to call it the Elijah Clark Evening of Grace, a celebration of brilliance and resilience, a night where silence would be broken. But not everyone welcomed the idea. Late one afternoon, as Victor returned from picking up flyers from a print shop, he noticed a sleek black car idling across the street. Vincent. He stood leaning against the car, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "You're really pushing this, huh?" he said as Victor approached. "I'm doing what your sister wants," Victor replied coolly. "You mean what you've convinced her she wants?" Vincent stepped closer. "Let me guess. After the concert, she'll donate the house, hand over access to some trust fund you suddenly found noble reasons to manage." Victor narrowed his eyes. "You think everyone's playing an angle because that's all you've ever done?" "You don't know me," Vincent snapped. "No," Victor said, voice steady. "But I know your type." Vincent gave a tight smile. "And I know yours, opportunist with a savior complex." "I'm not trying to save anyone," Victor replied, "just helping her tell the truth." "Well, enjoy it while it lasts," Vincent said, sliding into his car. "Because truth without power is just noise." The car pulled away, but the bitterness lingered. Victor walked up to the house, heart pounding not from fear but from the growing realization that this concert wasn't just a tribute, it was a declaration. That night, over dinner, Victor told Rose about the encounter. She wasn't surprised. "Vincent never understood Elijah," she said. "He was always about legacy, not truth. He doesn't grieve, calculates." "He's going to try something," Victor warned. "Maybe not now, but he won't stop." "Then we won't either," she said. "He has his tools. We have ours." The following morning, Victor went downtown to meet with Pastor Jackson, a well-respected black community leader who ran the cultural center where the concert would be held. The pastor was in his 70s, sharp as ever, and carried an air of deep-rooted wisdom. "You believe this'll do good?" Pastor Jackson asked after hearing the plan. "I believe it'll give people something they've been missing," Victor said. "Not just music, a place to feel seen." The pastor nodded. "Then I'll back it. But be ready, truth stirs the water, and sometimes the mud at the bottom don't want to be seen." Meanwhile, Rose worked on a short speech to open the event. She practiced in front of a mirror, hands shaking at first, voice cracking, but day by day, word by word, she reclaimed her strength. On the night before the concert, Victor found her sitting in Elijah's room, reading one of his final poems aloud to herself. He stood quietly in the doorway. "You nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted, "but also ready." He smiled. "That's all it takes." She looked at him, her gaze tender. "Victor, thank you, for showing up, for staying, for believing in him when you didn't even know him." He shook his head. "I didn't have to know him. I've known 1,000 boys like him, too bright for this world, too burdened by it." She reached out and took his hand. For a moment, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. The night passed quietly. Morning would bring the concert. Victor woke early the next morning to a gentle hush falling over the house. The dawn light slipped through translucent curtains, painting ghostly patterns on the wooden floor. He walked quietly down the hall to the kitchen, where Rose stood at the counter, polishing 2 coffee mugs. Her face was calm, but her hands trembled slightly. She looked up at him and offered a small, resolute smile. The concert was tonight, and the house once filled only with absence now felt charged with purpose. They drank coffee in silence, each sip grounding them in the day ahead. As the morning progressed, the Clark estate transformed into a hive of activity. Volunteers from the community center arrived, lugging cases of bottled water and stacks of flyers. Musicians came to rehearse in the living room. The pianist, a young woman named Tasha, sat at the grand piano, running her fingers over the keys, coaxing out notes that danced like fireflies. A local gospel choir practiced harmonies in the dining room, their voices weaving together in a tapestry of hope. Rose oversaw everything with delicate authority, offering quiet words of thanks, adjusting arrangements, calming nervousher grief now channeled into action. Victor found himself coordinating logistics. He wore a pressed shirt and tie for the first time in years, and each time he passed a window, he caught a glimpse of himself, a far cry from the taxi driver who once delivered pizzas by night. He shook off the thought and focused on the task at hand, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Each volunteer knew their role, Each instrument was tuned. Each seat counted. Mid-afternoon, Vincent pulled into the driveway in his sleek black sedan. He stepped out, exuding entitlement, and walked to the front door where Rose received him. Victor approached quietly and offered his hand. Vincent glanced at it, then at Victor. He took it and shook firmly. "Congratulations on tonight," he said, voice tight. "I'll come by later." Victor managed a nod. Vincent left afterward without further interaction, leaving behind a charged silence that reminded them both of the confrontation that awaited beyond tonight. They worked through the afternoon. As the sun began to burn away the morning mist, the Clark home fell into a steady rhythm of purpose and preparation. Volunteers taped program schedules onto velvet bulletin boards. Candles were arranged on tables draped in deep purple cloth, the color Elijah loved. Victor paused a moment to run his hand along the polished surface of the piano bench. He thought of Elijah's small hands dancing above the keys that once sang of grace and rebellion. Evening arrived with the soft glow of candles and warm light spilling from the windows. Guests began filing into the community center, a modest hall with wooden-backed chairs and a raised stage. There were families, students from Whitmore Academy, longtime neighbors, and a few reporters. At the back, Victor from his seat watched as Rose stepped onto the stage, her voice steady but rich with emotion, and opened the evening. "Tonight we remember Elijah, not as a tragedy, but as a voice. May his story awaken something in all of us." Oh, the first performance was from Tasha, whose piano rendition of Amazing Grace wove through the hall like a river. Victor closed his eyes and felt the undercurrent of grief release its hold. Later, the gospel choir sang Elijah's favorite hymn, their voices rising and falling in testament to resilience. Between performances, Rose shared Elijah's words, anecdotes of his humor, like the way he'd insist on dancing in their living room every Saturday morning, and recited a passage from his scholarship essay. "Sometimes I feel like the world wants me to smile but not speak." The room was silent, moved by the truth of a boy who had only ever wanted to belong. Then Rose stepped off the stage and Victor took her place. He spoke with the weight of someone who'd carried loss himself, of someone who'd listened in the darkest hours. "I knew Elijah only through his mother's stories and his words," he said. "But in them I heard my brother. I heard all of us who've been silenced, overlooked, blamed." He paused and looked out at the audience. "If tonight does one thing, may it be this. Let us not wait until silence becomes permanent. Let us listen now." There were tears, then soft sobs and exhalations of relief. Afterward, Tasha returned with a guest violinist, an older man whose melodies spoke of both sorrow and hope. Their duet was a haunting arrangement of a hymn Elijah had loved. And as their notes filled the hall, Victor watched families embrace, strangers reach out to one another. Through music, grief had become connection. At the end of the night, Rose stood with Victor near the entrance. A small line of people offered condolences, shared stories of children who faced prejudice, of schools that turned too late. Vincent appeared then, his posture rigid. He approached Rose, murmured something in her ear, handed her an envelope, and then looked at Victor. Victor watched as Rose's face softened. She nodded once, and then stepped aside to follow Vincent outside. Victor stayed silent, uncertain. Moments later, Rose re-entered, envelope in hand, and found Victor. "He wants to help," she said quietly. "He's offering legal support for the foundation." Victor raised an eyebrow. Rose continued, "It's not the same as standing here with me tonight, but I think it's a start." Victor smiled, placing his hand over hers. "We'll take what we need and leave the rest behind." They exited the hall together, side by side. Outside, the night air was cool, fragrant with summer blooms. Rose looked up at the sky. "We did it," she said softly. "He will hear Elijah now." "Ow," Victor nodded. "He will." The morning after the concert dawned quietly, the soft sunlight filtering through curtains into the Clark residence like a whisper of hope. Victor awoke before Rose. He wandered into the empty kitchen and found a note taped to the fridge in Rose's elegant script. "Vincent wants to talk. I'm stepping out but will be back soon. R." Victor folded it closed, sensing a shift in their world. He poured himself a glass of water and returned to the living room, where the grand piano stood silent, its surface catching the light like a promise. Downstairs, Rose and Vincent sat in the study, a room lined with books and heirloom photographs. Vincent's posture was taut with determination. "You crushed it last night," he began. "But this foundation, you're stepping into dangerous territory." Rose folded the envelope. Vincent handed her a proposal from his law firm offering to manage the foundation's legal framework. "I didn't ask for this," she said. "But I've always wanted Elijah's story to matter." "I know," Vincent replied. "That's why I'm here, to ensure things stay above board, because people will come looking for mistakes, the media will dig. You need structure, Victor needs discipline, and I can provide both." Rose looked into her brother's eyes, weighing each word. "He doesn't understand it's not about control. It's about justice, quiet justice," Vincent murmured. "If you trust me, I'll help. If not, I'll stay out." She handed him the envelope. "Start by drafting bylaws. Keep it transparent." Back in the kitchen, Victor sipped cold coffee when Rose appeared, her presence steadying. "Vincent's offering help," she announced. They sat across from each other at the table that had hosted sorrow and hope alike. Victor exhaled slowly. "I get why you'd take it, but are you sure it's the same foundation we started last night?" Rose reached across and placed her hand over his. "It is, because you're still in charge of the soul of it." They met with Vincent and his firm later that day in the study. Lawyers and financial advisors filled the room with professional paper shuffling and polite smiles. A projector displayed draft bylaws, board seats, and compliance regulations. Victor sat quietly as flowcharts and budgets scrolled across the screen structure he wasn't a part of building but now had to respect. When he spoke, his voice was careful, but firm. "This foundation is about children like Elijah. We don't want to write checks only to make headlines. We want real impact, mentorship, scholarships, safe spaces." Vincent nodded. "Agreed. This provides accountability. Donors want transparency. Schools want metrics. We get them all." Victor studied his brother-in-law's face and allowed himself to hope. Later, as the meeting ended, Rose took Victor aside in the hallway. "He's doing this for us," she said softly. "Not for control." Victor didn't respond immediately. He watched Vincent walk back to the car outside, firm steps echoing across the driveway. "I need time," Victor finally whispered. Rose held his shoulder. "Take it." That afternoon, volunteers organized files in the community center's small office. Victor helped sort photographs of Elijah, stories from students, thank you letters. He paused at a letter from a teenage girl named Maria whose scholarship he sponsored. "I never felt seen until someone believed in me, like you believed in Elijah." He pressed the letter to his chest. While Victor sorted, Rose arrived with lunch barbecue sandwiches and coleslaw, a comfort food nod to comfort hearts. They talked about Elijah, about mornings when he woke excitedly for school, about evenings when he practiced piano in the living room until dusk. They laughed through tears, comforted by memories now tied to a purpose greater than grief. That evening, Victor walked through the neighborhood near the community center, greeting familiar faces, neighbors who'd helped with the concert, parents whose children received help. They nodded at him with gratitude. He realized Elijah's story was already echoing beyond a one-night event. It was shaping community. Back at the house, Rose and Victor sat at the piano. She read aloud from Elijah's writings. "I know I can make it if the world gives me a chance." Victor responded with soft chords that carried the words. When she finished, she closed the notebook gently. He believed in possibilities. Victor nodded. "Now it's our job to keep those possibilities open." And late that night, as Rose rose to go upstairs, Victor followed. In her study, Rose found herself restless, rewriting a speech for the Foundation's upcoming press announcement. He sat near the window. "Whatever happens," he said, "we're already making a difference." She looked over, eyes shining. Yes, quiet justice and persistent hope. They shared a warm embrace, two allies forging a path together. The next day, Vincent met them for breakfast at a local diner. Pancakes, bacon, eggs, classic American fare. He slid into the booth between Rose and Victor. Reaching for her hand, he said, "I want you both to know I'm in this for the right reasons." Victor saw in Vincent a sincerity that surprised him. Maybe this foundation could survive beyond whispers of doubt. As Victor walked Rose to her door after breakfast, he said, "Thank you for trusting me." She kissed his cheek. "Thank you for staying." Victor watched her step inside before slipping back into his taxi, the world moving again beneath his wheels. Over the next week, they finalized the Foundation's mission statement, planned mentoring programs, and scheduled their first scholarship recipient ceremony. They closed each day with conversation and music. Victor taught Rose chord progressions. She introduced him to Elijah's poems. Their shared grief had become shared purpose. One evening, Rose gazed across at Victor as he studied a page of Elijah's poetry. "Promise me one thing," she said. He looked up, curious. "That no matter how organized or professional this gets, we never lose the heart of it." Victor smiled, placing his hand over hers. "I promise." Victor walked into the office of the community center the next morning, already feeling the weight of expectation. The walls were lined with photos of Elijah's scholarship recipients, their smiling faces frozen in moments that were once full of hope. Volunteers buzzed like busy bees, organizing binders and prepping name tags. Rose arrived moments later, looking determined in a simple blouse and cardigan presentation ready. They exchanged a quiet nod before heading into the small conference room. Vincent was there, already seated at the head of the table. Beyond him, a local school principal, a nonprofit advisor, and a city councilwoman completed the assembly. Victor took a seat beside Rose, who handed him a folder. "Board policy drafts," she whispered. Vincent pulled them together overnight. Vincent began. "Today we finalize roles and responsibilities. The city wants reassurance that this foundation can sustain itself." He clicked through a presentation: financial oversight, volunteer vetting, fundraising targets. When he spoke of metrics, Victor felt a twinge of dissonance. Numbers mattered, sure, but this was about people whose voices had been silenced. His pulse quickened. When it was his turn to speak, he stood. "This foundation isn't just about dollars or seats at tables," he said. "It's a lifeline for children like Elijah Hand, my brother Malik, who've been written off before they had a chance. We need structure, yes, but we need heart. Every program must carry that message." He saw the principal's eyes soften, the councilwoman's pen pause mid-line. Vincent nodded once, formally. They moved through the agenda. At the end, Victor's proposal passed unanimously. Later in the hallway, Victor and Rose stepped aside. "You did good," she said quietly. "You led with what matters." He shrugged, rubbing his forehead. "We did good." Rose smiled. Quiet justice and persistent hope. After the meeting, volunteers began mapping out mentorship programs, assigning college tutors, and arranging workshops on diversity and leadership. Victor dove into the details, contacting former coworker DJs to host community events, lining up after-school piano classes. Rose worked on the first applicant interview schedule. That afternoon, Victor drove to Buckhead's suburbs to meet a scholarship applicant named Maria, a bright senior with a passion for STEM and a legacy of silence from her community. They met at a cafe, she wearing a carefully ironed blouse and nerves visible in her posture. Victor assured her the foundation wanted to hear her story, no judgment, just support. She shared about her volunteer work tutoring younger kids, her dream to be an engineer, and how her race sometimes made her feel out of place in classrooms full of privilege. Victor recognized that voice, brave, cautious. He listened and offered advice. "You belong." He promised she would have a champion. Back at the center, Rose received the first gift pledge for the foundation from a local black pastor who had performed at the concert. The amount was modest, but came with conditions. No strings, just trust. Rose sat at her desk, staring at the pledge. For a moment, she didn't type a thank you note, just breathed, feeling a buoy beneath what had been sinking grief. Vincent stopped by later that evening. "You two are making waves," he said quietly, leaning against the doorway. "Be ready. The city is watching. They may come calling." Rose looked up. "Let them call. We have a story to tell," Victor added. "And we have a mission to keep." Vincent nodded slowly. "Then let's keep going." As night fell, Victor drove home through quiet streets, the glow of streetlights softened by recent rain. He thought about Elijah, Malik, Mariand, all the kids who needed someone who believed. He parked and went inside, hearing the sound of Rose playing piano in the study. He paused at the door and listened, a familiar hymn, slowed by emotion. He opened the door and joined her at the piano bench. They played together, harmony and melody blending in shared silence. Later, they walked onto her veranda and stood side by side. A faint breeze carried the scent of jasmine and quiet courage. Neither spoke. They didn't have to. In the days that followed, they faced backlash, anonymous threats, a critical local news article questioning Rose's motives, a skeptical donor. Each time, they addressed it with transparency, openness, respect. They held community forums, answered tough questions, reinforced the mission. Victor's office door remained open. Rose stood at podiums. Vincent sent in legal documents. The foundation endured scrutiny and grew stronger. 2 weeks later, Maria received her scholarship award at a small ceremony. When she hugged Victor, tears shining, he felt a shift. This was more than charity. This was legacy in motion. Rose watched them, tears in her eyes again, but this time for hope. Victor squeezed her hand gently. "We're doing this right." That night, as they closed the house, Victor and Rose sat once more at the piano. She handed him Elijah's notebook, already marked with new pages from scholarship essays. He opened it, eyes lighting on a new line. "I will speak, because someone hears me." Victor looked at Rose. "This isn't just Elijah's story anymore." She nodded. "It's our sand theirs." Fireflies flitted in the garden. The foundation's name, Second Sunrise, felt true. There was quiet justice, persistent hope, and a future waiting to be written. Victor woke to the sound of a phone vibrating on the kitchen counter. It was earlier than usual. Dawn pink was just tinting the curtains. He reached over and saw Rose's name. His heart sank. He answered, voice cautious. "I'm here." On the other end, Rose's voice was steady but urgent. "You need to come." He hurried across the hall to find her upright by the front window, duvet wraps around her shoulders. Rain had begun again, but heavier pounding. She handed him her phone. On the screen, an email from the city council, a public hearing scheduled for next week, questioning Second Sunrise's grant eligibility. Victor read it twice. The council cited procedural irregularities and questioned whether a newly formed foundation could responsibly manage funds. Victor looked at Rose. "They want to revoke the grant." She closed her eyes, swallowing grief and fatigue in the same breath. "This is it," she said. "Our test." They spent the rest of the morning preparing. Coffee, notes, printed bylaws, and receipts. Vincent arrived mid-morning with a legal brief, reassurance in his systematic calm. "We'll respond," he said. "They'll need proof. Let's show them transparency." Rose nodded. Victor took a deep breath. "We'll face them together." By afternoon, they were on their way to City Hall. The old building loomed, stately but intimidating. Families and volunteers accompanied them, carrying signs of support. Victor felt the weight of responsibility in his chest, every hopeful child, every grieving parent, all riding on this hearing. They entered chambers and took their places. Rose sat in the front row, clutching a binder. Victor stood beside her, notes in hand. Vincent took a seat with counsel. The first witness was a skeptical council member who questioned the speed of the foundation's formation. "How does the board justify awarding significant grants without a history?" he asked. Vincent stood. "Our board is comprised of professionals with diverse backgrounds, nonprofit advisors, educators, legal counsel. We've established transparent audits, community oversight, and clear metrics for grant issuance." The room murmured approval. Victor leaned forward, ready to speak. When it was his turn, his voice was firm. "This foundation isn't built on paperwork or buzzword sites, built on lived experience. We're not new to loss, we're new to leadership. We carry Elijah's voice and my brother's sand, every young person who needs someone to believe in them. Today isn't just about procedure, it's about justice." There was silence, then a murmur of respect. Next, a recipient of a community scholarship stood. Maria took the stand, nervous but resolute. She detailed how support changed her life, lifting her grades and her confidence. Rose's eyes filled as Maria recounted how Victor had called, encouraged her when she doubted herself. "I was seen," Maria said. "Not just as a number." The council listened. Most nodded pensively. A few looked concerned, but their tones softened. Late in the hearing, a local conservative voice raised concerns about potential misuse of funds. Victor stepped forward. "Every dollar is tracked, publicly reported. We're audited annually. You can review the books anytime." He held up their published financial summary. Rose added, "Our donors include community members who care more about impact than optics. They trust us because they see the results." Council members exchanged glances. After what felt like hours, the council announced a recess. They'd decide privately overnight. Victor and Rose stepped outside into the pouring rain. Volunteers stood with umbrellas. No one cheered, but there were nods of solidarity. They returned home silently, drenched but unbroken. Back at the house, Rose made tea. They sat at the table, listening to rain drum on the roof. Rose broke the silence. "We did all we could." Victor reached for her hand. "We did." Vincent joined them, handing over toast plates and coffee refills. "No matter what tomorrow brings," he said, "I'm proud of you both." Rose smiled, but tears shone. "Thank you for believing." Morning came heavy. Victor opened the newspaper online on his phone. Headline read, "Council approves remaining grant for Second Sunrise. Full audit to follow." He exhaled deeply. Rose stepped in, saw the headline, and closed the final gap between them. They hugged, rain-scented shirts clinging together. "We're in," she whispered. "We're really in." That evening, they returned to the piano room refuge and witnessed to their grief and triumph. Victor sat at the piano and played softly, a reprise of Amazing Grace. Rose placed her hands on the keys beside his. Together they played, their harmony stronger, more confident. Outside, the rain slowed to a gentle hush. Inside, a foundation stood and two souls found their purpose. Victor arrived at the community center early the next morning, the first hints of spring sunlight filtering through decorative stained glass panels. He paused at the entrance, inhaling the scent of fresh paint and promise through the open door. It was the day they would meet the first official board of Second Sunrise, and he felt both anticipation and quiet pride. Rose was already there, setting out framed photos of Elijah and Malik on the welcome table. She caught his gaze and offered him a reassuring smile. Around them, volunteers organized refreshments, placed name tags, and arranged seating in a semicircle to encourage dialogue. 20 minutes before the meeting began, guests arrived. Maria, beaming in a smart blazer, the local church pastor who'd pledged support, a couple of educators, parents whose children had benefited from the scholarship. Vincent stood with financial advisors, reviewing printed agendas. Rose and Victor exchanged a brief hug. She whispered in his ear, "We're ready." He nodded. The meeting opened with Rose addressing the group. "Thank you all for joining us as we take the next step. Today we form the board that will steer Second Sunrise into the future. Our mission is grounded in transparency and empathy. We learn from loss, but look toward possibility." Victor explained briefly how the foundation had started. A grief-stricken mother, a grieving brother, a community listening. Then Vincent stepped forward, outlining the legal structure, term limits, conflict of interest policies, clear framework for accountability. After structure came story. Victor introduced Maria, who spoke candidly about her journey from a shy teenager overshadowed by economic and racial barriers to a scholarship recipient thriving in STEM. She laughed as she described her first time presenting a science project before a crowd. She felt seen. Applause followed. Victor then shared his own reflection. "When we listen to each other's stories, we realize justice isn't abstract, it's personal. We're not here to fix everything, but to ensure no child is left hearing only silence." The board members then shared their goals. A local principal suggested mentorship programs in schools, a lawyer proposed legal clinics, a social worker offered emotional wellness workshops. Each voice built on the next, weaving a vision both ambitious and grounded. Victor realized this was the tapestry he'd longed for, each thread human and necessary. Mid-meeting, Vincent discreetly passed Rose. A legal document. It was the first official grant disbursement approval, earmarked for Maria's program expansion. Her eyes gleamed. He had upheld his promise. Rose's voice wavered as she accepted. The group responded with supportive applause. Afterward, during informal mingling, a reporter from the same local outlet that had questioned them approached Victor. She hesitated, then said, "Your numbers look good, but how do you respond to critics who say you're too new, too quiet to make a difference?" Victor met her gaze steadily. Change doesn't always shout. Sometimes it builds brick by brick, relationship by relationship. We don't chase headlines, we chase hearts. The reporter nodded, jotting notes. As people began to leave, Rose and Victor stood at the doorway, thanking each attendee. Maria hugged them, full of confidence. The pastor blessed their work. Parents expressed gratitude. It was a moment ripe with hope. Outside, family friends helped load supplies back into cars. Children waved as Victor and Rose exited under the afternoon sun. That evening, Victor returned home, sweating in his suit jacket, feeling both tired and alive. He found Rose in the piano room, reading Elijah's notebook by candlelight. She looked up. "How did it go?" She smiled before he could answer. "We found our wings today." He closed the door, sat beside her, and took her hand. "We did more than wings, we found our roots." They played the piano again, soft music winding through the room. Victor recalled Malik's voice singing a hymn, Elijah's poem echoing in their purpose. Rose closed her eyes, letting the melody sink into her soul. Late that night, the house was quiet. Victor placed Elijah's notebook on the piano, then joined Rose at the doorway overlooking the garden. Fireflies danced among the azaleas. He looked at her. "We're building something real." She nodded. Brick by brick, kindness by kindness. Victor woke early the next morning feeling a quiet ache in his muscles and his heart, as though the foundation's work had aged him overnight. He greeted the dawn with a cup of black coffee on the veranda, the air still cool, heavy with dew and possibility. Rose joined him in soft fleece and warm smile. "Ready for today?" she asked. He nodded, thinking of the scholarship ceremony planned for that afternoon. It was the culmination of everything, the ritual that would give Second Sunrise its true purpose. By mid-morning, the community center lobby was alive with energy. Photographs of Elijah and Malik lined a banner that read, "Second Sunrise Scholarship Presentation." Families, teachers, a local news crew, Mariel, in bright, expectant clothing, filtered in, greeting each other like old friends. Victor had on a crisp suit, tied dark with purposeful stripes, and he felt the irony of polishing his dress shoes after years of worn-out taxi shifts. Rose stood to his left as they took the stage. Vincent hovered nearby, his legal clipboard at hand. Victor cleared his throat. "Today we offer more than money," he began. "We offer belief." He introduced Maria, who stood to thunderous applause. She held a letter of acceptance to Georgia Tech, scholarship packet in hand, gratitude shining through tears. "I was someone who felt invisible," Maria said, voice steady. "But when you saw me, I began to see myself." That moment hung in the air like sunlight through stained glass. Next, they awarded 2 more scholarships to students Aliyah, aiming for marine biology, and Jamal, pursuing social entrepreneurship. Each shared their story of struggle and hope. The auditorium pulsed with empathy, awareness, and pride. Victor watched parents embrace their children, teachers exchange tears, volunteers beam. Rose stepped forward again to close. "Elijah believed in the power of seeing each other," she said. "Today, we keep that belief alive." She ended with a soft reading from Elijah's final poem. "In the quiet of our loss, we find the seeds of tomorrow." The audience rose in a spontaneous standing ovation, fitting applause for quiet justice given voice. After the ceremony, they mingled around tables laden with food sandwich platters, fruit bowls, casseroles fresh from volunteers' kitchens. Marcus, a volunteer chef, offered them Southern-style sweet potato casserole that reminded Victor of his childhood. The flavors of home carried poignancy now, earned through years of emptiness and hope interlaced. Vincent found Victor near the table. "You did well today," he said, offering firm handshake that lingered. Victor smiled. "We did." Vincent nodded, as if acknowledging more than just a job well done. It was acceptance. In the afternoon sunlight, Victor, Rose, and Maria walked through the center's garden outdoor classroom. Maria knelt beside a new native dogwood, shovel in hand. She planted a plaque, "For every child who found a chance." Victor placed a hand on her shoulder. Later, in the afterglow, he helped her sort books and lab kits for upcoming STEM clubs. Each act became part of their shared tapestry. At sunset, the ceremonies complete, they returned to the Clark house. Silence followed them inside, but not heavy purposeful, sacral. Victor found Rose at the piano as usual. He brought another copy of Elijah's poem now, one they carried forward. He sat beside her, and they played quietly, voices low, reassurance in melody. Over dinner, they reflected on the day. Rose spoke of Maria's radiant confidence, of children who found hope in small acts. "We started with grief," she said, "but we end with possibility." Victor nodded. Justice isn't always loud, it's in the lives changed. They spoke late into the night about next steps, expanding mentorship, reaching other school districts, applying for national grants. Their talk moved between logistics and memory. At some point, they recalled Malik's voice singing below Victor's childhood piano. In that memory, Victor said, "When we keep singing, we keep believing." Oh. Night deepened around the house. Victor placed Elijah's poem beside Malik's photo on the mantel. Their legacy, intertwined. Rose and Victor stepped onto the veranda again. Fireflies glowed like embers of chance. Rose reached out. "Thank you for being with me through every step." He squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you for trusting me." They watched darkness become quiet light, the sky echoing the idea that even the darkest night blooms with possibility. Victor awoke to an email ping. Subject line read, "Critical opportunity, national grant." He rubbed his eyes and checked over coffee, his heart thudding with excitement. The message explained a prestigious national foundation offering significant funds for programs addressing racial equity in education. They wanted Second Sunrise to submit a proposal within 10 days. Victor showed Rose, who sat forward in her chair, eyes bright. "This could expand our reach," she whispered. "A chance to move beyond Atlanta," Victor nodded. "But it's a big undertaking." They spent the morning drafting ideas. Rose focused on storytelling, how Elijah's story and Malik's voice could be woven into a broader narrative. Victor handled data program metrics, scholarship outcomes, community impact. Vincent walked by as they worked side by side. "You know this could mean more exposure and more scrutiny," he said quietly. Rose looked up. "We're ready." He nodded and left them to continue. They spent late hours gathering letters of support. Maria, Pastor Jackson, local principal Saul testified to the life-changing work of Second Sunrise. Victor reached out to journalists who covered the hearing. Victory. They agreed to write feature articles. Rose refined their mission statement and prepared a short video introducing Elijah and Malik. Late one night, Victor paused over footage of them, Elijah at the piano, Malik giving a eulogy. He realized this grant wasn't just money, it was a platform that could amplify their quiet justice. On day 5, while Victor was meeting with the community center director, Vincent arranged a board meeting at the Clark House in the evening. They convened in the study: Rose, Victor, Vincent, counsel, financial advisor, community reps. Vincent briefed them. "This grant can triple our budget next year." He emphasized compliance, reporting cycles, outcome measures, evaluation processes. Rose spoke of protecting their voice. Victor spoke of preserving their mission. Counsel suggested a compliance officer. Financial advisor recommended audited reporting software. Consensus formed around balancing growth with integrity. After the meeting, Rose and Victor walked through the empty house. She tapped the piano, and the chord resonated with possibility. "Do you feel it?" she asked. He smiled gently. "We're on the edge of something." She rested her head on his shoulder. "We won't let this become another story of voices lost." He kissed her forehead. "Promise me we stay grounded." She nodded. 2 days later they submitted. Emails confirmed receipt. They exhaled. But then a message popped up from a national watchdog blog questioning the foundation's rapid rise. It implied nepotism. Rose's brother connected them to city officials and questioned the legitimacy of Vincent's legal counsel. Victor noticed Rose freeze at the screen. He wrapped his arms around her. "We'll respond with facts." And they did publishing minutes of the city hearing, copies of bylaws, donor statements. They also posted a heartfelt video where Rose and Victor spoke candidly about their motivations and included Maria and families expressing gratitude, transparency in action. Day 9 arrived. They received an invite to present live via webinar before the grant committee. Victor practiced with Rose. His opening, her storytelling, Vincent addressing compliance questions. Each rehearsal brought them closer. Their voices grew stronger, more confident. Maria joined them for a run-through, sharing how she'd found herself. Her voice cracked with emotion. They all paused, tears pooling. That memory underscored why they were doing this. On presentation day, they met at the community center. A modest audience, cameras and video links ready. Victor began, calm. Second Sunrise started as grief, but it became a mission. Rose followed with Elijah's poem, reading it as if rekindling a flame. Vincent then demonstrated their compliance dashboard, budgets, audit schedule. Questions came from committee, scalability, sustainability, measurable outcomes. They answered with precision. A plan to introduce Second Sunrise mentorship into 2 more cities, expanded scholarship funds, annual audits, and community feedback loops. When asked about the Watchdog blog, Victor spoke for them all. We chose transparency over obscurity. We answer questions not to defend, but to uphold the silence we promised could speak. Afterward, they wait together. Victor held Rose's hand. Vincent placed his support quietly at their other side. 2 weeks later, a video email arrived. The grant committee congratulated Second Sunrise. They were awarded full funding for a 3-year program. Rose fell against Victor. He steadied her as tears rolled. Vincent smiled, but something in his eyes told Victor they'd crossed another threshold, not just funding, but acceptance. Maria later hugged them both, tears bright like morning light. You believed in us, and now the world does too. That evening, they met with the board to plan how to integrate the grant. They decided to pilot in Savannah City with similar needs. They planned evaluator checks, storytelling workshops, student mentorships. Rose stayed late reviewing new bilingual materials. Victor closed the study door behind him and found her in Elijah's room, reading his notebook again. They sat on the floor. She pressed the notebook closed. This is only the beginning. He nodded, tears bright. And it's going to be hard. She leaned into him. Hardest things often matter most. Later, they returned to the piano. Victor played softly. Rose sang a line from Amazing Grace, voice stronger now. He paused to let her melody breathe. She reached for his hand on the keys. Night settled outside. Inside, Second Sunrise had found its sunrise. Their justice was no longer silent, was already speaking. Victor stood at the threshold of the new community center in Savannah as the morning sun warmed the blue and white facade, its paint fresh, its promise fresh. Today marked the official launch of Second Sunrise's expansion, its first out-of-Atlanta chapter. Rose was beside him, clipboard in hand, radiant in a pastel dress that matched the blooms behind her. They exchanged a glance that carried the weight of every loss, every triumph, every quiet fight for justice that had brought them here. Volunteers buzzed around them, arranging welcome packets and name tags. Maria, now a confident college freshman, directed a group of freshmen eager for mentorship. Victor inhaled, feeling the hum of possibilities. Rose stepped up to the podium before a modest crowd of community leaders, families, students, and civic representatives. Thank you all for welcoming Second Sunrise to Savannah, she began, voice warm and steady. This isn't just an extension of a program, it's an extension of Elijah's and Malik's legacies, and of every child whose voice was never heard until someone listened. She introduced Victor, who spoke next. We are here to build bridges between grief and hope, between silence and voice. We're not here to tell anyone what to feel, but to show them they matter. We're here to hear them. Applause followed as they invited Maria to share her story again, this time with confidence that no longer trembled. Her words resonated deeply. When I walked into Second Sunrise's first event, I found courage there. Now I'm here to pass that on. Victor and Rose watched as freshmen lined up to speak with mentors, their questions personal, urgent, hopeful. Midday, they toured the classrooms refurbished for mentorship and workshops. Victor paused in a science lab, listening to Jamal explain his social entrepreneurship project. Rose joined him quietly, her eyes glossy with pride. Look at them, she whispered. They're telling their own stories now. After lunch, Rose led a roundtable with parents and educators. She listened as they voiced concerns, cultural sensitivity in programs, access to mental health resources, opportunities beyond school walls. Rose responded thoughtfully, promising weekly meetups, seasonal workshops, bilingual resources. She wrote their feedback in a notebook titled Listening First. Victor moderated a session with mentors, emphasizing boundary setting, active listening, trust building. We're not heroes, he said. We're scaffolding, strong frameworks that help kids build their own futures. An early afternoon setback, their display banner branded with the logo and tagline, Quiet Justice, Persistent Hope, was blown down by an unexpected wind gust. It fluttered across the courtyard like a fallen promise. Volunteers rushed to reel it in but struggled with the stakes and ropes. Victor sprinted over and helped secure it with extra weights scavenged from a nearby storage shed. Rose joined him, offering calm direction. When it finally stood firm again, they exchanged a breathless grin. Small obstacle, corrected. Progress continued. In the late afternoon light, the keynote speaker, a local civil rights leader, spoke of the importance of community roots. He praised Second Sunrise's approach, beginning in listening, centering experiences, and celebrating resilience. He echoed their words. Justice isn't always loud, but it's always lasting when built with care. Oh! As dusk fell, they reconvened for the closing circle. Participants lit candles and formed a circle around a small tree planted in memory of Elijah and Malik. Each person spoke gratitude and hopesome in English, others in Spanish, promising to steward each other and their community. When the final candle was lit, Victor felt tears stain his cheeks, not from grief, but from the power of connection. Later that evening, at the Clark estate, Victor and Rose stood on the veranda with cups of mint tea. The Savannah Center's lights glimmered, reflected in their eyes. "We did it," Victor said softly. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We did this together." They walked inside and returned to the piano room, where the familiar instrument awaited. Victor played a few chords. Rose sang a verse from Elijah's favorite hymn. The melody lingered, reverberating through walls filled with purpose. Before bedtime, they retrieved the framed banner from Savannah, one that had once blown down, and hung it in the study. It read, "Quiet justice, persistent hope." Victor touched the words and whispered, "Let this always remind us, progress is built one careful stitch at a time." Later, as they turned off the lights, Victor threaded his hand through Rose's. They paused in the hallway under a photograph of Elijah smiling in summer sunlight and Malik grinning beside his brother. Two boys whose voices had sparked a foundation. Rose brushed a tear from her cheek. "Good night," she said. Victor pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "Good night," he echoed. The story of Second Sunrise teaches us that true justice doesn't always shout it often, whispers through compassion, persistence, and quiet courage. It reminds us that grief can be transformed into action, and that the most profound changes come when communities listen deeply and respond with heart. Most importantly, it shows us that every voice matters, especially the ones the world has long ignored.